Unique people leading unique lives shape and inform Iowa City. This community is enhanced by these women and men who live in our midst, working, teaching, creating. Welcome to a series of conversations with people who have stories to tell. Join my guests and me, Ellen Buchanan, in a series of interviews called One of a Kind. My guest on One of a Kind is the Shakespeare scholar and University of Iowa professor Miriam Gilbert. For the past 33 years, she's been teaching undergraduates and graduates theater and drama at the university. Not only does she teach, but she edits drama anthologies, writes essays, books, teaches seminars for school teachers, is a favorite guest lecturer, creates CD-ROMs for use in classes, writes about Shakespeare in performance, and supervises the general education literature program. Now in her spare time, she serves on numerous committees for her Department of English, for the College of Liberal Arts, and the university. She's been a part of the Faculty Senate and Council for many years, in addition to the Board and Control of Athletics and the Cultural Affairs Committee. She studied at the University of Manchester in England, and received a BA at Brandeis University and her MA and PhD from Indiana University. Her honors and awards are numerous, and I'm just going to mention a few. The Michael J. Brody Award for Faculty Excellence in Service in 1998. The John C. Gerber Award for Excellence in Teaching, also in 98. The Amico Senior Faculty Teaching Award in 1987, and 2 fellowships, the Old Gold Summer and the Roy Carver Fellowship. Professor Gilbert owns, in Stratford, England, a townhouse built in 1875. She supports Hampshire and Riverside Theater, serves on advisory boards of United Way and Hillel. Now, also in her spare time, she enjoys cooking and traveling. Welcome to One of a Kind.
Thank you.
I know your story begins in February of 1944 in, of all places, Alabama.
That's
Aren't
right.
people surprised?
They are. My father worked for Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA. That's the job he got out of graduate school. So I grew up in a very, very small town in Alabama. The best way to describe it is that I lived next door to the town where Helen Keller was born, Tuscumbia. Mm-hmm. And when I was a Brownie Scout, one of the things you always got to do was to actually go to Helen Keller's home and go out into the backyard, and you could see the well where Annie mm-hmm. Sullivan taught her about water. But it was a little community called the Tri-Cities, Florence, mm-hmm. Sheffield, and Tuscumbia, and I loved living there and was there until I was 9.
Till you're 9 years old. Did your father start acting in amateur theatricals while you were in Alabama?
Well, he may have done it before, but that's certainly the first I knew of it. He loved doing little theaters, it was called. Everything from set building to minor roles. Mm-hmm. He never had a really major role, but I do remember that I learned to read very early, and I was allowed to help him learn his lines and to cue him as he practiced his mm-hmm. lines. And I wanted, of course, to go and see the play. The one that I remember especially is Death Takes a Holiday, where he played a baron. Mm. Very fancy evening dress and so forth. And he said I could come, but I had to promise not to say all the lines.
From the side, from the backstage.
And because we were in this small town, I think that my parents wanted to make sure I went to everything cultural that was mm-hmm. available. So there was little theater, and then there were 4 concerts a year, but they were amazing. I heard Arthur Rubinstein, I saw American Ballet Theater, I saw Ballet Russe, I heard Jerome Hines sing. I mean, I don't know quite how we managed to have these.
Was that like civic music in some areas?
Some it must have been, but somehow they got them. And I saw my first opera, La Traviata, uh-huh. when I was possibly about 8 or 9. And years later, my father figured out that we saw Beverly Sills. She was probably still Beverly Silverstein mm-hmm. at that time, mm-hmm. but she was with the Charles L. Wagner Opera Company, and that was the company that we saw in either 1952 or 53.
Oh, my.
And Daddy actually met her at a party in Cincinnati and asked her and said, could it be? And she said, well, if you won't tell, I won't tell. But I think so. Of course, who knew?
Yeah, what a wonderful memory. And then you like you said, you moved
We
after
moved
you
to
were 9
Cincinnati. Daddy decided that teaching looked like more fun. Mother had been teaching at a teacher's college in Alabama, and he thought, I think he was getting tired of just being a research lab person. He worked in hydraulics engineering, and he got a job teaching chemical engineering at University of Cincinnati, which has a very extensive engineering program. So I really grew up in Cincinnati.
And I hear that what you do in your family is get PhDs.
That's right. That's right. I'm the third in the family.
You're the third.
So I'm not special. Mother, Daddy, and me. And my
my.
brother's got an MA in special ed. So
Well, I'd say you're
so we're probably madly overeducated.
quite educated. So he must have given you, obviously, the love of the theater.
I think so. And I think in a way, growing up in a place where you couldn't get very much was probably good. That is, so you went to everything. I mean, there was no reason for them, no possibility that they wouldn't take me to a concert or a ballet, even if they thought I was too young, because that was all you could get. And so it was so special. So theater and music and dance have always seemed privileges and something that you always go to.
But Miriam, you wanted to be at one time, I read, a rabbi or be a Hebrew major.
Well, I thought about that. I went to Brandeis University, and I think somewhere in the back of my mind, I considered that. Of course, in Cincinnati, you have Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, which is the main center for training Reform Jewish rabbis in this country. So I had obviously met a lot of student rabbis, and I think that might have been in my mind when I went to Brandeis. But the first year at Brandeis and my first year in Manchester, when we were in England, turned me into a theater person, and I've never recovered.
And Manchester, thank goodness you haven't. Manchester, England was a real turning point for you, pivotally.
I think
for
so.
your profession and you personally.
Right. It was after I finished my senior year, so I did my freshman year at the University of Manchester, because again, my father had received, it was his sabbatical.
Okay.
We almost went to Bombay. We were just about to get the yellow fever shots, thank goodness. And then at the last moment, a grant from Manchester came through, which he felt was more appropriate for his work. So I did my freshman year at the University of Manchester. I got involved in the drama group at the Union there. They were just starting a theater department. They didn't even do a full-length play. We did all the full-length plays. And our first production was Harold Pinter's The Birthday Party, which we entered in the National Union of Students Drama Festival. It was like the big competition that ends up at the Kennedy Center here. So, and we got selected to go to Bristol to perform. So we performed in Manchester, then we went to Bristol, and Harold Pinter actually spoke at that conference.
Oh, wonderful.
And the day after we performed, there was always a discussion. You performed one night, and then there was a discussion, and things were going along, and suddenly this figure stands up in the back of the room and said, "May I address," I can't do the accent, "a few words to the producer," meaning the director, "of the birthday party, if he is present." The implication being that, of course, he wouldn't even show up.
Right.
And it was Pinter. And he hated our production.
He
just
hated it?
loathed it.
Oh,
because we got so many laughs that he thought the laughs were obscuring his
The
language.
real- oh.
And so people went at it, the director and Pinter went at it. And as I was going downstairs afterwards, I heard what has to be the classic remark. Somebody said, "This shows you the advantage of doing plays by dead playwrights."
Yeah. Perfect.
Which may be why I work on Shakespeare.
Yeah, that's right. Which leads us into Shakespeare.
Because he can't argue with me.
No, he can't argue with you. And you saw, obviously in Manchester, did you mount Shakespeare productions?
We didn't do Shakespeare, but I saw the Zeffirelli production of Romeo and Juliet. This was before he made the film. He had done a very famous stage production. So I saw that on stage. I counted it up once, and it seemed to me that counting everything, amateur, college, professional, I saw 35 plays in 10 months. I don't think I'd ever had an experience like that, and that's what England is like. There was just so much theater around. You saw everything. We went to London. If friends over at Leeds were doing a production, we zapped over to Leeds to see them. And of course, all the plays at the festival. But something like that, 35 plays in a year. and it was exciting.
So you came back from England and told your parents, I'm going to be a theater major?
Yes.
And
they
what
didn't-
was their reaction?
Well, airmail special delivery letter saying, no, we don't think so.
Oh, you did, but you said yes, yes, yes.
Well, no, I actually finally agreed.
Oh.
They said, you're not going to be an actress, which I knew. And they said, and this was 1962, they said, you're not going to be happy if you're not in charge, and we really don't see that a woman is going to be a director. In 1962, that was not such a sexist thing to say, although it probably was. So I ended up working in the theater and doing everything that I could, and everything from painting sets and connecting cables and so forth, and stage managing. But I was not a theater major, I stayed an English major. And I actually have to say that for me that has turned out to be the right choice, because my career does not depend on theater. I do theater because I love it, not because I have to, not because I get paid for it. So everything I do with theater is out of sheer love and excitement. And I've finally decided, maybe it's a rationalization, but that's better for me.
And why was it Shakespeare? What?
Well, how do you know why you fall in love?
That's true. That's true. Good answer. That's right.
But I think that Manchester had something to do with it. They told me I was registered as, you'll love this, an occasional student in arts, which really meant that I wasn't getting a degree. But they said you can take anything you want. So I was trying to do what I thought I might have done at Brandeis. So I took a philosophy course, and I took a French course, and I took a modern Hebrew course. But then I want to take an English course, and I thought, England? I'm in England. I'll take Shakespeare.
Sure.
So I took a full year Shakespeare course with the most advanced students, because there it's a third year course. So there I am, a freshman, working with the advanced students, heard wonderful lectures. Frank Kermode, who has a book that came out recently on Shakespeare's language, did the lectures on the comedies. The other people I've never heard of since, but they were exciting lecturers. I had never been in a big library before. I had no idea that you could just walk into a library and pick the books off the stacks. I would do that. I'd read 5 contradictory things and I'd believe it all. So I think it was the combination of the academic and then all the work I was doing with the drama group and seeing all the plays. But all I can say is I never recovered. It's always been Shakespeare.
It's always been Shakespeare.
always
So
been
you
Shakespeare.
studied Shakespeare, and then when you went to Indiana.
I did, and I ended up doing a Shakespeare dissertation there. And then
For your PhD.
For my PhD. And then fortunately, Iowa was looking for a Shakespearean.
Yeah, tell me how did you come to the cornfields of Iowa, Miriam?
Well, back in 1968, there were still lots of jobs available. I mean, everybody I knew was having job interviews and so forth. I actually didn't know that I could get a job as a Shakespearean. I thought everybody must have one already. But in fact, I was very lucky. I had a series of interviews, and I really owe this job totally to John Gerber, who hired me, was willing to put up with more than a certain amount of naivete and gaucheness at that point, and said they had had a lot of trouble getting a full-time Shakespearean, and would I like to come? And I really came to Iowa not just to teach Shakespeare, but also because the English department at that time, and I think still, but especially then, was really committed to undergraduate teaching. And they did a course called English Semester.
I read that in your...
which had 3 of us teaching together. Bob Scholes was still here, so I taught my first semester with Bob Scholes, a young man named Richard Dyer, who now is the music critic on the Boston Globe, and we were in the classroom every day, 5 days a week, 2 hours a day, 30 students.
The 3 of you?
3 faculty.
Oh, my.
And it is just the most exciting thing in the world. And I have been team teaching, I mean, obviously not every year, but some of my best experiences I team taught. I did that course about 5 times. I taught with John Gerber and Gayatri Spivak once. I've taught with other people. I team taught with Bob Carlson in education. I team taught with Dudley Andrew in film. We did a Shakespeare and film course together because he wanted to learn about Shakespeare and I wanted to learn about film. And we used to say we're the best students in the class. And we were.
Are you still doing this kind of team teaching?
It's harder to do. I mean, economics has a lot to do with it. But probably my longest stint with anybody was with George Farrell when we were in the unified program. And we team taught a humanities class together, a sort of Greeks in the Bible, but up into the Renaissance. And I have to tell you, to be able to sit in a classroom and listen to George Farrell is just wonderful. Of course, being heckled by George Farrell when you're up in front, a little less wonderful, but I learned how to handle that too.
That is great. And you said that when you came here, the English department was rather unique, and I quote, you said that the department at Iowa, English department, is good because you are valued for what you do and not fitting into a cookie cutter mold.
I think so. I think that's really, I think that was John's great legacy to the department, and every department
He gave you some freedom to kind of create unique things.
That's right. And I mean, I've never been a huge publishing scholar in the traditional sense. I do anthologies and I do work that's based on my production material and so forth. But I mean, I don't have 15 books. But this department has been willing to accept that, or at least was then. I think it's harder now because everything is a lot more professionalized and so forth. But you could do what you wanted, and they were willing to take my interest in theater and say, we value that in the English department.
Sure.
And we value what that brings to our classes. So that's what I meant by that.
CD-ROMs in your classroom? That's what
Well, that's the most recent thing. That's trying to find a way to bring the variety of theatrical interpretation into the classroom. And many people say, well, you can always watch a videotape of a Shakespeare play, but that only gives you one reading. And you don't actually have time to watch 4 videotapes all the way through. So the CDs that I make take specific scenes, specific moments, things that I think will be interesting for discussion, and I run those through a computer and mess around with them and so forth, and toast my own CDs. And then at the click of a mouse, I can do you 4 or 5 different versions of Now Fair Hippolyta, our nuptial hour draws on apace. Everything from, which is the opening of Dream, everything from a very loving, gentle relationship, he plucks the white rose, he gives it to her, to a version in which he is in armor, she is clearly a prisoner pacing on the other side of the room. They never get closer than, the width of the room. And when he says, I wooed thee with my sword, and you think, yes, and this is not going to be a happy marriage. I mean, those are the extremes, but by putting those right in front of the students very quickly, you then say, so what does the text say? And of course, what you discover is the text says both. It says, I wooed thee with my sword, and won thy love doing thee injuries. But I will wed thee in another key, with pomp, with triumph, and with reveling. So by doing that, you, in a sense, get people to see how the text is actually giving you more than one reading just in itself.
He's brilliant.
So I've been working on those for about 4 years now, and I still
How do the students like it?
They love it.
They do.
They love it because they're so visual, and they can spot things more quickly when they see it than just when they read it.
And don't you have your students perform in the
I
classroom?
do.
Is that rather unique? Or
Well,
is
it's something that came out of all my years in theater. I started doing it actually, though, with that course, English semester, where they told me that we were going to read 10 plays that I got to choose, and that students were going to be in acting groups. So they'd already thought of that, but that was my special responsibility. And I kind of took it and ran with it. And then I put it into every class I taught. And then I still remember a graduate student saying, she said, Miriam, before you came, it used to be possible to find a quiet room in EPB to study in, but it's not possible anymore. Of course, now we have classes going into night. But I think if you can own a piece of the text, and you have to own it in order to perform it, then it becomes yours, and you understand it from within. You also, I think, find language less difficult because it's not just this chunk on the page, but it's actually part of a conversation. That's my theory.
That's your theory. Do your students ever ask you, Professor Gilbert, who is your favorite character, or what is your favorite play of Shakespeare's?
They always ask, what is my favorite play?
And what do you respond?
The answer is usually whatever I'm working on at the
time?
moment. The best answer I've ever heard to this question comes from Trevor Nunn, at the National Theater now, but Cats and Les Mis and so forth. And Trevor Nunn would say, you mean After the Winter's Tale?
Oh.
And that is a brilliant answer because The Winter's Tale has it all. I mean, The Winter's Tale just tears your heart out. It's Othello, but it's only Othello through the middle of the play. By the middle of the play, the jealous husband has killed his wife. but we're only in Act 3. And his baby daughter, whom he is convinced is not his, has been sent out to be left deserted on a seacoast.
Abandoned.
And the baby is there. A bear comes in and chases off the guy who left her, and then she is found by an old shepherd. And the question is, will the baby get back and ever be recognized for who she really is?
That's the major dramatic question.
That is. Do you want to know?
Yes.
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 Yes, she is. She is. She does get back. But what's even better is what happens at the end in the most amazing scene Shakespeare ever wrote, where it turns out, do you want to know this?
I do. I'm going to go home and read this.
Okay, well, the wife who collapsed on stage, being in the middle of being tried for infidelity, at the last scene, the king, who's now reunited with his baby daughter, only she's 16 years old now, is told that there is a statue of his wife, and he can see it. And you go to see the statue, and he comments about how natural it looks, but it's not quite the woman he remembers. So this statue is more wrinkled. It looks older. And he imagines that he sees breath coming from it. And he wants to touch it, and he's told, no, you'll mar the painting. And finally, the woman in charge says, I can make the statue move. And music plays, and the statue moves. And the best line, maybe the best line Shakespeare ever wrote, the king touches her, and he says, oh, she's warm.
Oh, my.
And it's his wife.
That's the end. Oh, my.
Well, there's a few wrap-up lines.
Wrap-up lines, yes, but that's it.
But it's an absolutely magic ending. And I've directed this play.
Have you really?
I did it out at Community Theater. And it is a scene, it is so amazing because it is, we all wish that we would get a second chance.
Second chance, absolutely.
And he gets it 16 years later. That doesn't erase the pain. And
Shakespeare never erases the pain.
And their other child is dead, died because of grief at what was happening to his mother. And you'll never get those 16 years back, but she is alive.
She's alive.
And it's just an amazing play.
I can't believe I've read a lot of his other plays, but not The Winter's Tale. Well, I'm sure many of our listeners and viewers will go to their bookshelf and find the collection of Shakespeare plays and read
it's wonderful.
The Winter's Tale.
If you think about it, it reverses what happens at the end of Romeo and Juliet. Because in Romeo and Juliet, when Juliet is she finds Romeo dead, and she kisses him, and she says, thy lips are warm. She's that close to getting him. And then what do? They're going to build statues. So those lovely, warm children are going to be turned into statues. That's young Shakespeare. Old Shakespeare, the statue is alive.
Is alive.
And it's complete reversal. And the line is, she's warm.
She's warm.
And it's not despair, it is, how can this be possible? And I still remember a teacher of mine saying, well, what do you say to the woman whose life you have destroyed, whose children you have tried to kill? What could you possibly say? And to come up with those lines. I mean, we think of Shakespeare as big poetry, but it's actually a line like that.
You're warm. That's beautiful.
Isn't that wonderful?
Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh, I can just feel your passion for his plays.
Yeah. At the moment, though, I guess my favorite play is probably The Merchant of Venice, just because it's the play. I mean, it speaks to me in part because I'm a Jew, and I always have, I mean, when I was working on my dissertation, I just sort of sat there and stared at the page for a week and couldn't even write. But it's because it's a great teaching play. It so disturbs people, and you can't get easy answers. No sooner have you decided that Portia is, a callous person, then you say, well, wait a minute, what about this? Or no sooner have you decided that Shylock is an awful and appalling man, than you realize that he's also had lost his daughter and had her taken away by a Christian. And the play just, you can hold an opinion for maybe 2 minutes before something comes along
and then
to change it. And so working on that play, as I've been doing, and thinking about that, and looking at the history of performance at the RSC over the last 50 years, I suppose at the moment that's the one that I'm most deeply into. But Who knows what I'll be teaching next week?
And that has the beautiful speech of the quality of mercy. I mean,
it does, but
yes.
later on in the scene, when Portia she says that when she doesn't know how to get Shylock to change his mind. By the end of the trial scene, when she's got him, she says, "Down therefore and beg mercy of the Duke." To which I say, I thought it was going to drop like the gentle rain from heaven. What's this begging thing? So the same speaker, the same concept. When she has no power, she says mercy is the sovereign attribute. When she's got the power, mercy's what you beg. See, that play unsettles you so much.
Yes.
Because you can't hold.
You
just
don't know
one
which
feeling.
side maybe there are no sides.
Well, or there are so many sides at any given, but they keep changing. And I remember showing that to some of my freshmen once. And when she said, not a drop of blood, they cheered. And 5 minutes later, when the Duke said that that Shylock had to convert, they went,
the gasp in the audience.
So first they're absolutely, yes, get him. Yeah. Don't let him kill Antonio. Yes, yes. And then they were shocked. Now, any play that can take you through that, hey.
Yes.
Hey. As a student of mine would put it, on an exam once, Shakespeare is no dummy.
Yep.
What can I say?
I love that line. Shakespeare is no dummy. Oh, my. Well, when do you find time to write? I've got to show the camera Stages of Drama, the 4th edition, and I assume there's going to be a 5th.
I'm working on it even now. I do a lot in the summer if I can. This one I'm off in Stratford, but fortunately fax machines, emails, and so forth. And in fact, the time difference works to my advantage. I write something, I send it to Carl Klaus, he sends it back to me, we can get it to New York by the end of the day. I mean, it used to be fax, now we do it by email, it's not a problem. So I do a lot in the summer just because it's easier to concentrate. But of course, when you're at a major university, I'm very lucky. I do have a research assistant who can help me with some of the background on new plays that we'll be adding to the 5th edition. And so that helps a lot. But you just have to find the time.
And you do these Shakespearean performance. This is Love's Labour's Lost.
That's one that came out in '93.
This is the one you dedicated to your father and your mother.
That is true.
Yes.
That is true.
Yeah.
And the new one on The Merchant of Venice will be coming out, I hope, in November. And that is going to be published by the Arden Shakespeare, and they are one of the big publishers of a major scholarly edition. And this is a new series called Shakespeare at Stratford. And rather than looking at all performances of Merchant of Venice, it's just looking at them within the last 50 years. So if you think of the RSC as being sort of like a little laboratory in which they keep doing the same plays over and over again and things change.
And you write in the summer when you're at Stratford, and you bought this townhouse, was it in the 80s?
Bought it in '83.
In '83.
So almost 20 years.
And
hard to remember.
And you spend summers and the winter breaks, like I said.
And the winter break there, yes,
and
absolutely.
You've got a family. You are a godmother to.
I have two godchildren in Stratford, two in the States. The ones in Stratford live right on the same street I do, Albany Road, and they have. Well, the boy especially, Sam, whom I have known since before he was born. Sam is less interested in theater now than he is in soccer. I mean, we've got to be honest about this. But he has been on the stage of the Royal Shakespeare Company as a party guest at the Capulets party.
That's a beginning.
Absolutely. And of course, extravaganzas have been staged both in my front room and in my backyard. And when we visit Kenilworth Castle, we have done the death scene of Richard III. I have had 7 kids dying right there on the greensward with green and orange plastic swords. It's wonderful.
What fun.
So some year, the thing I really want to write is a book about me and the kids and Shakespeare. It's going to be called Shakespeare and the Pirates.
Do it.
But I haven't gotten there yet.
Don't have
I've got to get through all this other stuff.
Amen. I mean, I don't know how I don't even when you sleep. My gosh. And what are you working on now? You've got a book coming out?
Well, the Merchant of Venice is coming out. I'm working on 2 essays for Oxford. They're putting, Oxford University
Yes.
Press, they're putting out something called Shakespeare and Oxford Guide, and this will be 2 essays on performance criticism. Sort of,
Okay.
what is it is the first one, and then performance criticism in action, and I'll work with Taming of the Shrew. And then I'm doing the 5th edition of Stages of Drama. So we're choosing new plays at the moment, and then I think I'll have about 8 or 9 new introductions to write.
Whew.
But as my colleague Carl Klaus said,
What does he
you
say?
know, once you've got the formula, anybody can be a hack writer. So this always cheers me up.
Yeah, right. I've got to ask you, this is I would love to know, of all the performances you've seen, of all the performances, is there one that just, as the kids say, knocked your socks off, that you just took your breath away?
It's hard because there've been
There's so many.
There's so many. I mean, I think of, all-day extravaganzas like Nicholas Nickleby or
Sure.
the Greeks or so forth. But I guess that I still, in a way, come back to 1989 and Mark Rylance doing Hamlet at Stratford. He's the best Hamlet I've ever seen. And I guess what hurt and grabbed me the most was the hurt. I'd never seen a Hamlet before who was so vulnerable, who stood with his back to the audience at first, who, when he talked about his father, took this little crumpled photograph out. It was a modern dress, and he talked about his father, and it was clear that he carried the photograph around. You do that, don't you, with people that you love? And he could hardly bear to show it to you. And he was funny. He spent most of the play in pajamas. He could be brutal. He could be brutalized. And I just have never learned so much about Hamlet as in that single performance. But it came out of Mark Rylance's willingness to be vulnerable on stage and to let you see how much what had happened to him really hurt him, his father's death and his mother's remarriage, and that carried all the way through the play. And we talk about Hamlet's melancholy, but this isn't the same, and we talk about his wit, but this was somebody who
profoundly painful.
Very painful, and it just has stayed with me for so long. It really has.
Ooh, gee, I hope they videotaped it or filmed
Well,
it. Did they?
there's probably an archival
one.
videotape. On the other hand, a good memory would be, I suppose, Nicholas Nickleby, which, as you know, was 8 hours. And I remember I saw it once in July on a whole day thing, and I was so excited that I bought tickets so that I could see it on New Year's Eve when I went back. And I was standing up during one of the intermissions, and somebody turned to me and said, "Haven't I seen you?" It was a woman who had been in the theater in July, the same performance, and we were now back seeing it again. And I just, I could hardly stand. And I remember we clapped and clapped and clapped, and finally Roger Rees said, "It is almost midnight." He said, "We want to celebrate New Year's Eve too." But I mean, we didn't want to let them go. And I can't remember ever being so happy in the theater as I was that night.
It's a wonderful production.
It really is.
I always ask Miriam, my guests, this question about what or who has had a major influence in you. I know John Gerber really did.
Well, I always start with my parents because I think not just what they gave me, but also the examples they set. It has never occurred to me that you couldn't be a full-time professional as a woman, and I don't think I realized until much later in life that assumption was not one easily shared by people of my age, but it's because of my mother. So most to them. A special thanks, I suppose, to Norman Rabkin at the University of California at Berkeley, who was my Shakespeare teacher one summer in Indiana. When I didn't even take his class, I just audited it, but I've never before or since known somebody who could make you feel as though the top of your head was coming off and your brains were being stirred around, and how exciting that was. That's not true. I've met other people, but Norman, very, very special in my life. And then more actors than I can think of, just because I've learned so much from talking with them. Those are the people that especially occur to me. I tend to have an extended family, so there are lots of
Besides your nephew, who is starting at the University of
Chicago, and my niece will be going to college next year. But most, because I'm not married, most of my friends are, as I say, I feel as though I have an extended family.
Well, you said you have godchildren.
I have godchildren. They're important to me. But the people that I've learned from, I think are the ones that I would think of. And of course, how can I not say this? My students who...
Do you love teaching?
I do, because they come up with questions. And what really gets you is the way in which they'll ask a question and you'll suddenly think, where did that line come from? I've been teaching this play for 30 years. I've never noticed this line before. And suddenly a student will ask a question, and so it becomes new for you. Or the seminars I've done for school teachers in Stratford, and even a place that I've started to get used to, but they come and they enjoy it, and they ask questions, and so then it becomes new for you again. So that's the great thing about teaching, is it keeps you feeling new and young and excited about what you do.
That's a great answer about your students teaching you. And you're finding time in the community to teach a Thursday night session with Riverside Theater.
Well, these are just the Thursday theater talks, which are essentially before a production starts to try and open up questions and ideas about the production. It's something that started, we thought it was going to be an audience development thing, but it's actually turned into a very free-ranging discussion. I think the one that has touched me the most so far was before the production of Wit, about the woman and with cancer.
And one of the best plays.
And the people who came to that, I had the director and the chaplain from hospice as my guests, and people who came to that discussion clearly knew about hospice and had experience with it. And the questions and the comments and the discussion of why we believe in medical as opposed, in winning and in conquering disease rather than in managing disease, and how much that management strategy still is something that we need to accept. It was very interesting.
It's a great play.
Yes, and it gets you thinking about a lot of stuff. And that's what's been fun about the Thursday Theater Talks, is it asks you to think about the issues that a play raises, and I love that.
You have so much energy. My, you really do. My last question is, what has been the best thing about for you living in Iowa City all the 33 years, Miriam?
Close to it, yes.
Yes. What do you like best about Iowa City?
I didn't get warned about this one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Well, no, I mean...
That's okay. It's so hard to choose, isn't it, among all the goodies that are here.
What keeps you here, I guess?
But what keeps me here, really, I mean, it's simple. It is the Department of English and the university and the teaching I do there. And I knew that after spending 15 months in England, when I had a year off. And I was there for both summers and the year in between. And I thought, this is really too long to be away from Iowa City. This is where I live. This is where my work is. This is where the students are. This is where my colleagues are. So it's not a single thing, but it's that whole world that's been created for me. And I'm very happy to be a part of it.
Well, I think we'll leave it on that note. And thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I'm sure there'll be a lot of people wanting to ask if they can sit in on your Shakespeare class. You are a wonderful teacher.
Thank you.
My guest on One of a Kind has been the Shakespeare scholar and professor of theater and drama, Miriam Gilbert. She has received many honors for her outstanding teaching. In addition to her classroom work, she writes books, articles, guest lectures here and abroad, holds seminars for school teachers, serves on numerous university and community committees. Juliet asks in Romeo and Juliet, what's in a name? Well, for many of us, Miriam Gilbert's name is synonymous with the word Shakespeare. She is simply amazing with her enthusiasm, intelligence, dedication, and passion for the theater. Miriam Gilbert is one of a kind.